So hello everybody, here is Michael from New Left. And today we will be speaking about the situation of unions in Ireland. And I am happy that I found Ian, who is well versed in this whole Irish situation and the way how Irish unions are working. So Ian, can you please introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, how you end up being a trade unionist?
Sure. So my name is Ian McCardle. I'm the Deputy General Secretary of the Communications Workers Union in Ireland. We represent postal, telecoms, tech, ICT call centre and retail workers. We're a private sector union in Ireland. How did I get involved in trade unionism? I basically had some friends who were trade unionists. I'd been involved in student union politics when I was younger and saw an opportunity to join what was then the Irish Bank Officials Association in Ireland. It's now the Financial Services Union. I joined, worked for them in their organising department for a little while. And after some time, I applied for a position in the Communications Workers Union as the head of organising and was very lucky to be able to take up that position. Very privileged to work for the CWU. So over the years, I would have developed the organising strategy and the organising team. I built up a team of organisers in the Communication Workers Union. And then I changed role recently to National Officer for Telecoms. And then more recently, as I say, I've been appointed as the Deputy General Secretary.
Mm-hmm. Why did you choose this career? You know, there are always multiple opportunities in life. Some people choose totally different careers. So what was the pull? Why did you choose, being a trade unionist? I guess everyone has their reasons. So I'm curious, what are yours?
Yeah, it's a good question. A couple of different things, I think. I get, look, a lot of people, I think, in the trade union movement have a keen sense of right and wrong, social justice, fairness, equality. They're all qualities I would place a high value on. My sort of grand uncle, if you like, was an organizer, a volunteer organizer in the village that my mother is from. So I guess it's kind of a little bit in the DNA as well. Very proud to have that little bit of heritage in trade union organizing. And yeah, I can see sort of the labor movement in Ireland. I see worker exploitation happen all the time. I had a keen sense of it as a young worker myself. Before I got involved in trade unionism, I would have been on the receiving end of some of that exploitation. And when I got involved in, like, I've been working since I was 14, 15, working summer jobs, working in manual jobs where the work is tough. And I have distinct and clear memories of working as a kid with older men who would always say, get out of this job if you can. I was lucky enough, I was a summer worker. Mm-hmm. So I was, I had other opportunities, if you like, that these men didn't have. And I saw how hard they worked and the impact it had on their lives. And that always stuck with me. And then the opportunity came along, essentially. And I just thought, this is something that I think I could be good at. I think I would enjoy. I mean, there's a bit of vocationism, I think, to most trade union work. I think anyone that works in the labor movement, they certainly don't do it for money or personal gain. I think these are people, like, I see
some do, but yeah,
it's another story. Yeah, but maybe some do. That's true. I mean,
those who are flexible with their morals, So
yeah. I mean, that's fair. I've seen some of that, but I see so much fantastic voluntarism among our own shop stewards and workplace representatives in the Communication Workers Union. I mean, these are people that are the backbone of our union, the backbone of any union. These are people who are motivated to improve the workplace for themselves, for their colleagues. And I mean, I've seen it really sharply, starkly, clearly defined in non-union workplaces where when workers...
What I wanted to ask about the trade unionization in Ireland, but in general, because I pick the brains of trade unionists, what is your theory of mind? Why is it so relatively rare that people go into this kind of, I think, very fulfilling work, and the money isn't that terrible? Yeah, it's not like we are all on minimal wages. But people are kind of, I guess, scared, or maybe there is not enough validation in the society for that work, because in my eyes is one of the most fulfilling work there can be, helping other human beings. But A, it's really almost no one wants to do it from my experience. And B, even the trade unionization in Europe nowadays isn't exactly rocking. Yeah, we will be talking about it. But I want to pick your brain what you think. Why is it that way it is, that something that should be actually on the forefront of everyone, that, yeah, I want to do this, I want to fight and help other human beings, like it's quite good life to live, yeah, and you get paid for it, even that, no, that, yeah, you have to beg people to become shop steward sometimes. So what do you think?
Are you talking about professional or like paid organizations?
Professional as well as I mean, that's my experience when I'm talking with people, and not only in Slovakia, in other countries as well. Not then say, hey, join trade union and work for trade union. It's like go into the woods and fight the Nazis and risk your life. Like the level of fear and kind of like pushback is totally off compared with what is really, offered. It's no one is gonna kill you. People go into jobs that are literally dangerous rather than being trade unionists. And there is something going on in our culture. And I just wanted to hear your opinion on what it is, because it's not rational, definitely.
Yeah, look, it's not rational. I think there's a couple of things at play. I think we value different things now as a society as well. I think that's part of it, is just the how we value contributions to societal and economic good. Those have changed. I mean, we just had our first trillionaire in the last month or two. So that says something about the way capitalism has moved the needle further and further down the consumerist greed. I mean, neoliberalist agenda has really accelerated quite significantly, obviously under Trump, not just under Trump, but I mean, it's been, we've been on this journey for a long time, I guess. Certainly for in the Irish context, it's hard to, I mean, you've asked a couple of different questions there. It's hard, first of all, sometimes to get people to join unions, even when it's a workplace where the workers themselves enjoy full collective bargaining, which is a rare thing in Ireland. Ireland has a voluntarist industrial relations system. And what we mean by that is, we can organize, I could organize in a workplace, there might be 1,000 workers. I could organize 800 of them to join a union, write to the boss and say, look, we want to sit down and have a conversation about, what's going on in the workplace. And the company can just ignore the union. They don't have to respond to me. They don't have to engage with me. There's no legal lever that my union or I can pull.
Let's jump in. I guess this didn't fall from the sky. Some political party introduced this very peculiar, I don't know, attitude towards union to Ireland. Do you know when it happened and who's behind it and how it came to be? That as far as I know, you are rather the exception than the rule in European Union. So yeah, lucky you.
Sadly, we are the outlier. Yes, Ireland. Ireland is an interesting country. We tend to find Irish solutions to Irish problems, and our solution to the problem of industrial relations was to keep it voluntarist. When did it happen? It has always been that way. That's kind of the system that we inherited from. I mean, Ireland was colonized, as you know, by England. We didn't really secure independence until the 1920s, and we inherited a system of industrial.
Yeah, but the Brits are not the way that you are, as far as I know.
No, and so they've evolved. You're absolutely right. So their system of industrial relations has evolved to reflect a modern.
So you're kind of stuck for 100 years somewhere in the past. Okay, well.
So whereas in the UK they have, you're absolutely right. They've developed a system, and in fact I used their system in my previous union. I worked across the 32 counties of Ireland, so I was able to operate in Northern Ireland, and I got to use the industrial. They call it the industrial court system, and within that system, you know, if an employer refuses to engage with you, but you can prove that you have 50% plus membership, then you can refer to the industrial court and you can force the employer to negotiate with you. Now, it's collective bargaining. It's limited collective bargaining, but it's collective bargaining nonetheless. So yes, the UK did evolve their system of industrial relations. We simply haven't. We've kept.
Okay, so let's pick on that. How it came to be that for 100 years you kind of stuck in this loop.
Yeah,
and not much happened there.
Well, that's a political choice.
No, obviously.
That's a political choice. I mean, there was a time when, and again, this is back to the Irish solution to an Irish problem. Ireland was a more conservative country then, perhaps, than it is now, but certainly at the time when Ireland was trying to open up its economy to foreign investment, our government once upon a time would have said to the American investors in particular that were coming into Ireland, a lot of them came in the 70s and 80s to open up pharmaceutical companies. And they were encouraged by the government of the day, look, we deal with trade unions, we would encourage you to develop a relationship with trade unions. So a lot of the companies that came into the economy then actually did talk to unions. And a lot of workers joined the trade union movement through those positive relationships, if you like. But then came the wave of American tech investment, and that really brought a different culture and dynamic into industrial relations. Those companies were invited here to take advantage of a young, English-speaking, highly educated, modestly paid workforce, and they were encouraged to come to Ireland on the basis. And one of the questions would have been, do we need to deal with trade unions? And they were told then, no. You know, you don't have to deal with trade unions if you don't want to. A lot of those companies that have come here have clearly reflecting the American culture, if you like, of the time. They opted not to deal with trade unions. And now a lot of the workers in those companies didn't want to join a trade union because they were well paid, they were well looked after, you know, they were seen as good jobs. But what we've seen now in the last couple of years is some of those companies are letting staff go in big numbers, particularly in the tech sector, where my union operates. And that's changed attitudes now. People are, like, particularly workers that have come here from other countries where collective bargaining and union recognition are taken for granted. These people are now realizing my job is at risk, I better join a union. So they contact the Communication Workers Union through our Digital and Tech Worker Alliance branch in the tech sector. And they say, we want protection, we want collective bargaining, we want union recognition. And we have to explain to them, well, under Irish law, you're not entitled to that, but we'll certainly help you fight for it. And that's what we've been doing. We've led a number of high profile strikes now in one particular company.
In other words, the foreigners are bringing you the culture that you were lacking, or the attitudes that you were lacking. I guess those foreigners are German speaking and French speaking probably, and stuff like that. Italian,
a lot of Brazilian, and a lot of
even
Asian.
that. Okay.
Yeah, a lot of Brazilian workers, a lot of Asian workers. Like we have. I'm very happy to say we've got a wonderfully diverse membership now. We have a committee in one of those workplaces in Covale, and we just did a training exercise with them a couple of weeks ago, and there were 12 people from the workplace, and only one of them was Irish, which was, you know, it's great because, you know, we get different perspectives, different cultural perspectives, different views, different ideas on how to deal with the workplace problems that these workers are dealing with. So it's a truly diverse experience. And you're right, these workers are coming here kind of demanding their rights as they see it that they should have, because they would have had them in their home country. But Ireland, as you said at the start, we're the outlier. We cannot legally guarantee union recognition or collective bargaining.
So let's measure the temperature of 2026 in the Irish population. So how do unions stand it as a kind of force for good, or some positive vibes? I hope that it's improving, that the vibe is kind of going into your direction, and after 100 years, maybe the laws might change. I don't know. Tell us.
Well, we do need the laws to change. Right? That is the answer. I mean, the Communication Workers Union, along with SIPTU would be the largest union in Ireland. Good progressive union, along with Mandate, which is an excellent union. They operate in the retail sector predominantly, and then the Financial Services Union, another very good union in the finance sector. So with those three other unions, we formed a campaign called Respect at Work. And this campaign between SIPTU, CW, FSU, and Mandate really is to take advantage of the opportunities within the Adequate Minimum Wages Directive that was recently passed and is obviously now transposed across the various member states. So we ran a campaign, the four unions, during the last general election in Ireland, which took place just around the time the transposition was due to happen. And we were looking for political parties to agree to include a pledge on collective bargaining and the transposition of the directive in their programme for government. And we were successful in that. We got the majority of the TDs, or certainly the majority of the candidates that were seeking election, to sign the pledge. And ultimately, the current government has agreed to implement, the Adequate Minimum Wages Directive. And they've set out now a programme of actions around that directive. So there's a group that leads the negotiations on behalf of our Congress of Trade Unions that deals with government and the employers group to try and implement the best version of the directive. Now, obviously, there's very strong employer opposition to that. And certainly the employer group, employers union, have said this will not change the voluntarist system in Ireland. So we're not going to win the war through the Adequate Minimum Wages Directive. What it has demonstrated is these four important private sector unions have come together, worked very, very well together. And I think that's going to sort of create the benchmark, or create a foundation, I should say, for future cooperation that ultimately is going to be focused on changing and shifting the political agenda.
When you tell it to the people in Ireland that you are the outlier, how do they perceive it? I guess, usually it's the case that people don't even know that it's so bad. Yeah, people kind of take how the country is working and assume that this is normal. And when they find out that actually no, normal is totally something else, even in Brazil and wherever, then I guess they are pissed. I don't know. Tell us.
Yeah, workers who are facing redundancies, or facing uncertainty, or like if a worker who's come here on a visa is going to lose their job on the whim of a decision made by Meta, for example, to just invest in AI, and hundreds of people, like we have literally seen thousands.
Yeah, but I'm asking about the Irish, not about the foreigners. The foreigners are a different story, but the Irish, because at the end of the day, the Irish have the political power to change it. And for 100 years, they were kind of dormant and didn't bother to change it. And I hope that they slowly are waking up to the fact that being the only country in European Union, or I don't know, maybe two of the 27 isn't like, that's splendid. I'm so proud.
Yeah, well, look,
be the worst. Yeah.
Look, trade unions are still very much respected in Ireland. So let's just be very, very clear about that. It's the largest civic society organization in Ireland. There's across the island of Ireland, there's about 800,000 people are in trade unions. Ireland is a small country, so that's a significant.
How big is the workforce? So what is the percentage? 20?
Well, the population across the island is about 5 million, and I think the workforce is about 2 million. I think it's probably
2 million is the workforce. So it's
like
maybe 30 percentage points penetration, something like that. Okay.
Give or take. It's probably in the 20s actually. So maybe the workforce is a little bit higher, but certainly, look, the movement trade union movement, the labor movement is well respected, and I think Irish people understand the value of, they understand the value of community. They understand the value of solidarity, so I think that's there. So when you have the conversation with Irish workers about it, yes, they get it. When you have the conversation with Irish politicians, that's different. I mean, you'd be surprised at how many politicians simply don't understand, that we operate in a voluntary system.
Don't understand or don't wanna understand, because this is the thing. When you are paid for not understanding something, it's hard to understand it, no? So
I think genuinely based on the conversations. So the Respect at Work campaign, we had a lot of conversations with a lot of we call them TDs in Ireland, with elected politicians. So with our parliamentarians that we met, both candidates that were going for election and the elected people, and a lot of them just don't understand the industrial relations system. So you have to explain that to them. You have to, take them on a bit of a journey. So a lot of them just don't. I mean, look, they're busy politicians, and I think the trade union movement in Ireland maybe needs to up its game in terms of how we engage with politicians. And I think that will change over the next few years. So yeah, a lot of them don't understand. Is not now. Some of them don't care. Let's be clear. Some of them simply don't care. Workers' issues. Some parties, workers' issues.
Right-wingers are right-wingers, and they are meant to be right-wingers. That's fine. But by the leftists, it's a bit surprising that they don't have the basic kind of knowledge about what are unions for and where it came to be. But that leads to another question. How is it in Irish schools? Absolutely no mentioning of trade unions. You have at least some mention somewhere, sometimes, that something like this exists, and because this is always, as far as I know, nowhere in European Union is it part of the curriculum, nowhere, which is kind of mega strange. We can recite bullshit we will never use in our lives, but something that literally brought us 8-hour workday and vacation time and whatnot, people don't know that it didn't just fall from the sky. That capitalism gave it to us forever.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, look, trade unionism it's a very important part of our history and our fight for independence. Trade unionism was the labor movement was key to that. So, for example, James Connolly, who is one of the godfathers, if you like, of the Irish trade union movement. He was part of the 1916 Rising, and was shot. Was killed by the British. He was executed, tied to a chair, famously. So, like, that's a big and important part of our Irish history, not just for the trade union movement, but just, for our fight for independence as well. So these two things are very closely interlinked. Prior to 1916, we had the 1913 lockout, which, every school, these are important parts of our history as per the curriculum that's taught in Irish schools. So the 1913 lockout is famous for, and I suppose many would see it as the start of trade unionism in Ireland. That's kind of how it's seen. I mean, it obviously goes back much further than that, but for the purposes of the history books, the 1913 lockout is a pivoting.
What was it? I don't know the story. So
it's essentially the labour movement organised the tram workers in Dublin through Connolly and Larkin, and essentially there was a dispute, and the forces of capital. William Martin Murphy, who owned the trams and indeed the newspapers took on labour, locked out the striking workers. There were demonstrations in O'Connell Street in Dublin. People were killed. It was a massive lockout, a massive dispute, and I mean, ultimately, the capital won. The striking workers were defeated in that moment. But I think it set the stage then for the growth of the trade union movement in Ireland too. The movement, went on to be much, much stronger after that. And as I say, you went very quickly from 1913, the Great Lockout, to 1916, and then the role that James Connolly and the Irish Citizen Army played. The Irish Citizen Army was, if you like, it's where workers trained and drilled as soldiers. There was a very clear vision that, if we're going to reach an independent socialist Ireland, we need to be prepared to fight for that. And the labour movement took that responsibility seriously and trained and drilled accordingly and played its part in the 1916 Rising. And as I say, James Connolly, along with other people, paid the ultimate price for that. So that's well documented in Irish history books. And then there are, like, through some of the teaching unions that we have in Ireland, they're very invested in having those optional curriculum items available to kids in schools as well, to learn about the modern trade union movement and the challenges that we face, and why trade unions are important in terms of whether it's workplace democracy or community in the workplace, or fighting exploitation and protecting individual workers' rights and collective workers' rights. Those options are available, but I don't think they're compulsory currently in the Irish education system.
Yeah, but still, then at least on this front, you are better off than most countries, because when I talk with people from wherever, then it's usually not the case that trade unions are mentioned in history books. And well, the omittance is kind of mega odd that something that important just doesn't exist. But we can recite whatever bullshit we learn in schools. So,
well, I mean, look, Ireland is still a young country insofar as independent Ireland. We celebrated the centenary of the 1916 Rising and our independence subsequently, only recently. So that's still, in relative terms, those chapters are very fresh in our memories. So I think that's why, among other reasons, as I mentioned earlier, why it's so important and so much still a part of our curriculum, and long may that last.
Good. Another question I wanted to ask is about the structure of unions in Ireland. So how exactly is it set up, like roughly? Yeah, how big is the trade unionization? Because what I've seen when I'm talking with different people across Europe is that every country has its own kind of game. Yeah, in some countries it's mega centralized. In some countries it's very dispersed. Really, everywhere it's different. And I just kind of asking those questions because I want to see how the different approaches are elevating or moving or creating the momentum so that the trade unions is well received and it's growing. So, enlighten us. What is the Irish situation like? How is it divided? How big those unions are? What's going on there? Because as an example, here in Austria, we have 7 trade unions. When I was talking to guys in Scandinavia, in Finland, or in Sweden, it was reaching 50 plus or even 80. Like totally different way of doing things. So I'm curious, what is the Irish strategy on that front? Because in my mind, but that's me, come together and create strong unions makes sense, but somehow the Scandinavian model with this plethora of different unions seems to be working better. So, it's very counterintuitive for me. So what are the Irish like?
So look, I think we have, in Ireland, the best part of 50 unions, I think, now.
Okay, so more to the Scandinavian model.
Yeah,
then.
yeah. And I mean, bearing in mind, as we just discussed earlier, Ireland is a small country. So
Now, the
But
Finns
look,
are as small as you are, and they have around 50 unions as well. So, you know, it's very similar.
Yeah. I mean, look, so we operate, I mean, I guess, so there's one Congress, one federation in Ireland, the Irish Congress of Trade Unions. So, and that operates across the island of Ireland, north and south of the border. So we're, you know, we have a united platform for the trade union movement on the island of Ireland. Within that, then, I mean, I can speak better about maybe the union movement in the Republic of Ireland. I mean, certainly there are, I guess it breaks up into two segments, if you like, public sector unions and private sector unions. And you've got some of those, one or two of the bigger unions that might operate in both camps. So as I mentioned, SIPTU earlier, that's the largest union on the island of Ireland, and they would represent both public and private workers. But then you've got unions like my own that I mentioned earlier, Mandate, FSU, and a couple of others that really are only representing private sector workers. And then other unions, for example, Forsa, the teaching unions, the nursing unions, they're largely public sector unions, albeit Forsa does have some private sector members too. And then it's kind of, you know, it's kind of sectionalized or, you know, broken out by work category. So my own union would have grown out of the telecommunications, post and telecommunications, when it was under government control. So that's now obviously broken away. It's now largely privatized, liberalized, and in one case, there's a semi-state that still operates, albeit on a commercial basis. So the communication.
So it used to be public, but now it's private because of the privatization, basically.
Correct. Yeah. So that's how some unions have grown. They've grown up in the public sector, but they've moved on from that now. And there's a couple of unions like that in the movement. So look, it's in some cases, you know, like the teachers unions, they've all, you know, they've come out of the education sector, and you've got at different levels within education, you've got different unions representing them. We have, you know, there's one big large nurses union, albeit other unions represent nurses too. So, you know, it's kind of segmented by work area, with the exception of, as I say, some of the bigger, like SIPTU as a generalist trade union, they would represent a very broad, diverse group of workers.
What about the penetration? Because from my experience, the blue-collar workers, for reasons we can talk about, are more eager to join union than white-collar workers, usually. Yeah. So what is your experience in Ireland? Because, and also this is interesting that it kind of mirrors the economy. Yeah. Some economies are more blue-collar oriented than others. Good example is Germany, highly competitive economy, but they have very big industrial sector. So for those reasons, IG Metall is bigger than Verdi. So that's kind of outlier as well in different ways, because normally the third sector is in most countries much bigger than the second sector, the industrial sector. So Germany is one of those exceptions. I don't know about the Irish situation. So how is it spread out? So agriculture is probably very small as everywhere in the West, but the industrial / white collar sector, how is it? So I guess white collar is bigger, but maybe I'm mistaken.
Well, look, you're right about the agricultural sector. Yes, it's very, very low levels of union membership there. That would have been much higher, you know, decades ago. Well, the unions that ultimately grew and became and coalesced into SIPTU would have represented large numbers of farm workers. Those numbers have obviously changed over the years as the economy has changed. But in terms of like managerial white collar kind of work would be, I think in the public sector would be quite strong still, but in the private sector, not so much.
What does it mean? Not so much, like 10-ish something, or even less, more? What is it? When the average is around 30%, 28%. So, you know, some sectors are stronger, has to be, than the average. Some are way below average. So
I think quite a bit below. I'll be honest with you, Michael, I don't have the numbers on that. Like I can only speak to my own union's experience really when it comes to, you know, that differential. Like we've got quite a few manager members in our union. We actively recruit them and organize them, and obviously a lot of them, like we're I think very good at organizing in the places where we have collective bargaining. So a lot of our manager members came in at entry level positions and have been promoted, and they've kept their union membership because they see the value of unionism. And obviously then in the workplace, we try and encourage a culture where, you know, the very senior management teams, you know, have no issue with their own managers being in the communication workers union. So yeah, we've got strong manager members where we have.
By the way, question: are this information disclosed? Because in many countries, it's kind of, you know, secret who's member and who isn't. But depends, no? That's why I'm asking.
Well, it's a good question.
Unless you wave the flag, of course, when you are shouting that you are then, oh yeah, then everyone knows. But you know.
Well, in the two former, let's put it this way: the two main groups of workers, if you like, as in our postal workers, they work in a company called An Post, which was once upon a time, it was a government department. It's not anymore. It's a semi-state, commercially run semi-state. So we have a number of managers' branches in that company. So the managers they join the branch, they're in the branch, they're active, they have an AGM, they sit across the negotiating table with the senior management team. So they're not shy about being union members. And then the other company in the telecom sector is called Air. And again, that would have been, you know, a former department. And we have a managers branch there as well, where those managers are not afraid to, you know, say we're union members, we negotiate, we represent. But when you move out of those former public sector spaces, I think it's fair to say management membership, white collar membership drops off quite significantly, you know. But that reflects again the level of union density that we might have in other companies where, you know, they haven't grown out of the public sector, and it just reflects the difficulty unionizing and organizing workers in Ireland, where, you know, we have these legislative challenges to what we do.
So how do you see the future? You know, we were talking about all the initiatives that are coming from European Union, and some of them might be the wind into the flags of the union ship. So yeah, predictions are hard to make, but you know, there are feelings and you know, gut feelings. So how do you see it when will you break the spell of being maybe the only country in European Union not to be able to bargain freely whenever you want when you achieve the you know, position to do it, just because, well, it is the way, it is the law.
Well, one thing I was going to say to one of our previous questions about the attitudes to trade unions in Ireland is, I'm happy to say there is still a very strong appetite, particularly among young workers, to join unions and to be active within the trade union movement. So despite our very, very weak worker protections and collective bargaining legislation, or the absence of any real meaningful trade union recognition and collective bargaining legislation, that appetite is there. There's still you know, people see the value and want to be. Talking about the youngsters and how they are joining the unions. And I wanted to ask how it came to be that the young people are so eager to, or more eager, it sounds, like the previous generation. I assume the economical situation isn't rosy, and the kind of, you know, salaries compared with the value of real estate just doesn't kind of match the situation. So everyone who knows basic math understands that with this salary, I can pay this flat off in 760 years. So maybe something should change. Yeah. Well, you know, something should change, and I think young people see that. And yeah, to answer your question, I think that's partly why there is an appetite still, a very strong appetite among young people to join trade unions.
The strongest you ever remember from your experience, like this, because this is sadly the case that the Gen Z / millennials in most Western European countries, and West, I mean not only Western Europe, but like West, the whole West, even in America and wherever, they are screwed. So, you know,
yeah, no,
unless they fight, there is not much hope in the future.
No, I think in recent years, you know, it's picked up, and it's to your point, you know, it's because young people now realize, you know, they're not going to enjoy a better future than their parents had. For the first time, the social contract has fundamentally failed them. It's broken. And, you know, any of the young people now that are paying attention, and so many of them are, thankfully, so many of them are engaged, you know, politically and, you know, through society and through economy, their own economy, they see, you know, they can see the, you know, capitalism is what capitalism does, and they're been in some cases robbed of their future. And that's before you even get into a conversation about the impact of AI. So, you know, I think they see, if you're going to fight for change, you need a vehicle to fight for change. And thankfully, a lot of young people still see the trade union movement, the labor movement, as that vehicle for change. To your point earlier, you know, the 8-hour workday, the weekend, public holidays, you know, minimum wage, living wage, you know, equality in the workplace, worker protect, you know, et cetera, et cetera. You know, we still have a job as a movement to remind people those were hard fought for gains for workers across the country, and they were hard fought for by workers in unions who realized we deserve a more equitable share of the resources and the profits that are made, and these things shouldn't be taken for granted. And I think young workers now realize these things can't be taken for granted, because the social contract is as broken as it is for them in terms of their ability to have a good job, have a decent wage, and afford a home. Certainly the afford a home piece is in Ireland still fundamentally beyond the reach of so many young people. And as it is, the ability to earn a good salary in a decent job is always under threat. I mean, we're still, like many other countries, going through a cost of living crisis.
Now, this leads to the question I wanted to ask about the political situation. Now, is there some sign of awakening that the people, mainly the young people, are moving to the left so that they kind fix the problems that they are facing, or it goes, sadly, in some countries it goes to the other side of the political spectrum, and radical right is gaining? Because I can tell you from my experience in Austria, and we are the worst country in European Union on this particular issue, that the confusion is so big that people don't understand that this is self-sabotage in Austria. But that's another discussion with other people. So how is the situation in Ireland? So I hope that you are more rational, or your folks are more rational and don't support the oligarchy. But at least I fight for whatever. Yeah.
Look, I always try and be positive about these things. I think we are a little bit, like, I obviously speak to my European colleagues and get a sense of what's going on in other countries, and then you read about, you know, what's going on across Europe and elsewhere as well. Ireland is not as far down the road, if you like, of that political shift to the right. You know, we're lucky in a way. That kind of nationalist right-wing fervor hasn't taken root to the same extent. Now, it's still a problem. There is still a hard right movement in Ireland. There is, you know, there's plenty of political racism and fascism out there. But right now, thankfully, it's still on the fringes now.
So below what, 10% or 5% even, or where is it roughly?
Oh, it's about, well, I'm just trying to think.
I don't need exact numbers, but I will shoot it here. Austria right now, 38%. So almost 40% of Austrians would vote for FPO, which is the radical right party. So we are the worst in all of European Union, because 40% is a lot. So what is it in Ireland?
No, we don't have anything like that in Ireland at this point in time, thankfully. No. I think, like, to define it as hard right, that kind of, that kind of neo-Nazi, fascist, right wing. Thankfully, there's nobody that has been elected to the Irish Parliament
Okay, so they're outside the mainstream politics.
Yeah.
Okay,
and now there have been candidates both for our Parliament and for the local councils. I think they've had a little bit more success, maybe not even as far right as that, but there has been a clear shift to the right in terms of some of the local elections. We've had candidates who have had some success there, but within the Parliament, there is a small political party. They've had a number of people elected, but they're not hard right to that kind of fascist, that neo-Nazi fascist. They're not as far on the spectrum as that.
Okay, so far you are immune. Enjoy it till it lasts.
Yeah, well, social media giants are doing the best to change it, aren't they?
Yeah, well, they are. No? Okay, so that's a good news, something I didn't know. So how do you see the future then? So next parliament might move more to the left, or what is going on when you are kind of measuring the mood of the Irish populace? What is it now?
We really have, so in Ireland, our political history is basically, there's two main political parties in Ireland. Depending on who you ask, or depending on what way the economic winds are blowing and the political winds are blowing, people will say those parties oscillate between being centre right and centre left, and they kind of, one of them would be defined probably more as centre right, and the other party might see itself as centre left, but I think a lot of people would say they're maybe centre and possibly centre right, depending. So I mean, look, without getting into the nitty gritty of that, those are the two. Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil are the names of the parties, and those parties, since Irish independence was achieved, have pretty much, run the country. Occasionally, you'll get smaller, like we have proportional representation is the system that operates in Ireland. So that does allow for coalition governments to emerge. So we've had coalition governments, including the Labour Party, including the Green Party, including sort of a more right of the centre right Progressive Democrats Party. They don't exist anymore. And some other coalitions of independent parliamentarians that have propped up various governments. So we've never in Ireland really enjoyed a proper, for want of a better description, proper left government, a clearly defined Labour-led or Social Democrat-led, or Sinn Féin is the other large political party that kind of, would be centre left as well. So we've never had a government where those parties have been, in charge. So we've never really seen what could be achieved with that kind of a government in place. And I mean, that's what probably needs to happen if we're going to change some of the legislative obstacles and barriers that exist in this country to, proper worker protections, union access, collective bargaining, union recognition, and the removal effectively of the employer veto within the voluntary system that we have. So coming back to one of your earlier questions, that's what needs to happen, I think, for meaningful change to happen within the labour movement. We need to see political
change. How possible is it, and how probable is it, like measuring the mood of the people?
It is both. It's possible. Is it probable? I mean, look, it's politics, like right now I think we're 2 years into a 5-year term of government, or maybe a little bit longer. So we're a little bit away from the next general election. So certainly I think there's an onus on the trade union movement, particularly the private sector unions, but I think we need the public sector unions to offer assistance and help and guidance through our Irish Congress of Trade Unions to be more active politically with those parties on the left, but not exclusively. I mean, I think all parties have an obligation to do more work for workers, and I think we need to focus on that to try and shift the political needle more to what's right, what's fair, and what's just for the trade union movement and for the workers and the members that we represent. Now, is it possible? Yes, it is possible. I mean, we're a small country. Our parliamentarians are very available to us. We're lucky in that way as a country. Like we can easily access our TDs to meet with them, to discuss our issues with them, to lobby them. And I say lobby them, I don't mean in the kind of the multinational type of lobbying. This would be literally workers going in, meeting their local political representatives and having that conversation with them. I think it is possible to set a clearly defined worker union agenda for the parties of the left to take into a potential program for government if they're successful in the next general election.
Mm-hmm. Now, fingers crossed. This leads to another question I told you I want to discuss, and that's the Irish money laundering / however we want to call it, willingness to play along with the behemoths from primarily US, but not only. And there is some pushback from EU that this game took too long and the billions are kind of missing. So how do you see this particular elephant in the room in the whole Irish politics and the Irish strategy to allure the big money from wherever and do the money laundering? Now, it's not only you, it's Luxembourg as well, it's Malta, it's Cyprus, so, there are different different countries who like to play this game, but you are from Ireland, so how do you see your role in this whole endeavor? And how do you see how to put it? What are average Irish people thinking about this deal with the devil? Because me as a leftist, I see it as a problem, and I wouldn't ask for the blood money, but that's me. Yeah, and maybe the average Irish person is less finicky about where the money is coming from, and how is the taxation scheme helping Ireland and so on. So, what is the news on this front?
That's a big question.
Yeah, well, it's a complicated one, but it's a big question for us Europeans, because this is literally not billions, but trillions of euros in the long run. So, no small deeds there. It's a lot.
It is a lot. I mean, look, Ireland,
and it's missing in Europe. Now, when you imagine that we wouldn't be doing this game, and we would be taxing those big giants as they should be taxed, then a lot of stuff could happen that today is just fairy tale. As
Ireland,
public transport or better schools or whatever, the money is there. It's just we are not taxing it away.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, Ireland is a small, very open economy, right? And look, as we touched on earlier, over the years, our governments have very aggressively gone out and sought foreign direct investment. And we made the decision a number of years ago to lower our corporate tax rate. So that was a clear pitch to particularly, not exclusively, but particularly to the American, emerging. I mean, there weren't the tech companies then that they are now, but we were pitching for that business.
By the way, what is it now? 12 percentage points, something like that?
Well, I think no, officially it is 12, but I think with the OECD and the kind of the legislative piece that's changed.
No, they said at least 15 when I'm not mistaken, so you had to raise it a bit. Okay.
But yes, you're right. I think.
But still, you are at the total bottom of what's possible. Still, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's 12.5% is what the Irish corporate tax rate is, or was certainly prior to those changes that were brought about. I mean, look, our economy, like we have to measure our economy in two different ways because of the effect of, you know,
the overblown sort of GDP and then the real one.
Yeah, exactly. So we have our GDP and then we have our real GDP. And I know, the phrase leprechaun economics is used. I mean, that's not entirely unfair. I mean, it's a little bit offensive maybe, but we do in fact have two economies in this country, and as we talked about earlier, that doesn't just affect the economics of the country. I mean, look, we reap the benefits of we've huge corporate tax income in this country. Like we are enjoying surpluses at the moment to the tune of billions, thanks to these companies that have come to Ireland and do business in Ireland and employ a lot of people here and pay, in some cases, we can talk about some of the tech workers that are very, very badly exploited through the subcontracting model that these companies employ. But if you look at, for example, the pharmaceutical sectors, a lot of very well paid jobs, a lot of taxes being paid by the workers that benefit from those well-paid jobs. So it's a decision that our governments over the years have taken to attract that. I think to some degree at the cost of our own indigenous industries and our sectors. Like, we haven't developed an indigenous industrial base. Well, not so much an industrial base because our economy is maybe not designed that way, but certainly there's lots of natural talent in Ireland that hasn't benefited from the kind of encouragement and investment maybe that these foreign direct investment beneficiaries have come. And obviously, not only do they come here and pay low corporate tax, they're actually sometimes encouraged here with financial incentives to come here. And some of those companies do pay, they offer very good jobs and they pay very good salaries, but a lot of them don't. A lot of them come here and they don't pay good wages, and their model is just complete exploitation and cheek by jowl capitalism, and high churn workforces, and that has effect on our politics, it has effect on our culture, and it has an effect on our economy as well. So but to your point about you describe it as money laundering, it's a big problem. Like, Ireland is benefiting.
But that's the conundrum in the whole thing. I totally understand Irish position, no? That for you it's more good than bad, but for rest of Europe is more bad than good. So, and correct. In the end, when we look at it as a European Union and not European disunion, no? Then the money is missing everywhere, and even you in Ireland, because I guess your primary partners in trade are other European countries. No, that this is the sad part of the thing. When you will look at it holistically, not from with a view of one particular country, the money that is lost and all the investment that is lost because of that's just kind of hindering the development of the whole continent. So that's why it's devil bargain. That's why the situation for you is so complicated, because, well, but this is what I was asking. What is the average Irish person thinking about it? Are they pro? Are they contra? Are they some questions are really complicated to answer, but people have opinions. So
I would say the average Irish person would be very much pro. I mean, you got to bear in mind the companies that come here and operate here are very large, very powerful, very wealthy. We have an American Chamber of Commerce in Ireland that is also very powerful, very influential. We have a naturally pro-capital, history and governments over the years that are very, very keen to be seen to facilitate foreign direct investment and the capitalist class. So you take all of those elements combined, and then you've got in the media, they get more than a fair share of coverage. I mean, if a trade union report comes out, we're lucky to get a mention in the media. I was listening to a report yesterday about a consulting company that's announced that Ireland should set up an investment fund for AI, and also at the same time freeze the minimum wage and, you know, stop introducing worker-based benefits.
Mm-hmm.
It got lots of coverage, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So like, and I mean, I don't think Ireland is unique in that regard. I think a lot of European countries probably suffer the same ailment. But so all of that combined, the average person in the street is going to say, yes, of course, Ireland, you know, should
Do the
keep
people
this model.
understand that in the long run we are kind of self-sabotaging our whole continent with this approach? That the benefits of small country shouldn't outweigh the negativities on 400 million other people? Is this discussion framed in that way, that yeah, maybe what 7 million Irish are benefiting and 440 million other Europeans are losing? So yeah, I don't know.
No,
you know,
no,
I'm
no.
a leftist. Maybe I can take it. I can say
The average
this
Irish,
is not cool. I wouldn't be proud, you know.
No, the average Irish person would not think that way. No, I mean.
Yeah, but that's the sad truth. That's what these money laundering schemes are, not only for Ireland, for the Luxembourgians and Cyprus and whatnot as well. But in the end, it's just literally trillions that are lost from Europe.
I mean, you have to bear in mind, you see, like in terms of trying to understand where, let's say, the average Irish person, and I'm not sure what the average Irish person is, but like we were colonized up until, you know, we were a colony for 800 years. We suffered all of that. And we finally got our independence, as I said, not that long ago. And we were a very, very poor country for a very long time when we achieved independence. And there would be perhaps maybe a thought process around this that would say, look, we deserve this. You know, Ireland was literally fighting for its survival.
Little bit of goodies, yeah. Never mind where they are coming from.
I mean, when we achieved independence, we became a very, I think, insular economy. We wanted to kind of look in, not look out. And then we changed, that attitude changed over the years. And obviously then we joined, as it was then, the EEC. And that gave us access to vital European funding. And we were at, like Ireland, there was a time we were touted as an economic miracle within the European Union. Like, look at what we did for Ireland. We changed them from a poor backwater on the edge of Europe to, you know, this industrial powerhouse. That's true on the face of it, but it was done with a bit of, you know, those different economic levers we pulled, one of them being the tax lever. And I think now you're quite right. And if I was in another European country, I'd be looking at what Ireland has achieved and the cost of what we've achieved to the rest of our European partners. And the fact is, yes, Ireland has facilitated an economic success story, but it's done on the back of some companies who've taken full advantage of the way our taxation system has been set up over the years. There was the famous double Irish. Don't ask me to explain it because I'm not an economist. I'm going to try and explain it, but certainly the double Irish was a kind of a tax loophole where, you know, these big multinationals could funnel money through their Irish. In some cases, they would just be brass plate companies. They wouldn't even be a real company. They'd be a shell company, and they'd avoid almost entirely paying any tax. So yeah, Ireland is an economic success to some degree on the back of the cost of taxes.
C'est la vie, but now I have maybe the last question. How did Trump kind of change the dynamic of acceptance of these deals? Because, well, many of those companies, mainly in IT, used to be democratic. In the democratic part of the divide, Republicans and Democrats, and for last couple of years, they switched to the Republican Party. Facebook, Google, you name it. And well, now they are in bed with Donald Trump, the orange goblin, as some of them are calling him. And this might change the dynamic of acceptance of those deals, because now these companies are screaming out loud that they want to exploit workers and just sacrifice them on the altar of whatever. artificial intelligence for, what is his name? This German-sounding fella who's running together with Elon Musk,
Sam Altman.
PayPal.
There's Peter Thiel.
Peter Thiel, one of the crazies, who's talking about Antichrist and whatnot. So those guys, I don't know. I don't want to be friends with those people. So what is the temperature right here, right now in Ireland? Is it changing? Because when the company starts to behave really with questionable ethics, and I don't know whether the media is talking about it in Ireland, but what's going on?
Talking about which, Michael?
Now, Google, Facebook, Apple, I don't know, Amazon, all the big ones are, as far as I know, have the headquarters in Ireland, not only one or two. And as they switch the political labels, as they kind of openly are supporting Trump and all the policies that are happening, exactly as you were saying, in a populace that is relatively left-leaning, and the young people are relatively anti-capitalism, I imagine that it's kind of not, liked very much. That this is really the bargain that we struck. In the past, it was kind of acceptable, but as they are moving to the right and more into fascistic kind of ways, then the acceptance, I imagine, is going down. I don't know. That's why I'm asking, because the last 2 years were crazy, no? 1.5 years or what? When you see the images and the shooting and the kidnapping and everything in America, then the normal, healthy human being is probably not like, yeah, I want this at home. The more, the better. Let's beat each other over bullshit, and shoot each other out.
I think in terms of, if I'm understanding your question correctly, I mean, the effect of Trump himself and Trumpism on those big multinationals, the likes of Google, Alphabet, Meta, Facebook, I think Ireland / Europe has been a little bit insulated from that in terms of, let's take the DEI piece, right? So that has had an impact, but it's been limited enough, I think. I mean, I have had conversations with some workers who would say, they've seen a little bit of a shift internally, but it hasn't been that much, albeit I did have one conversation with one worker who really, was a member of the LGBT, was a member of the queer community, and basically was very involved in some of the initiatives within Google, effectively, and found that the funding for those projects, if you like, was withdrawn, and that was on the back of Trump. So it has had an impact. It has had an effect on, and a very direct one, for some of those groups of workers. But it seems to have been confined to those groups of workers who were kind of activists, nearly, campaigning within the workplace. And I think, and I don't have a lot of evidence to back this up, if I'm honest, because, our levels of trade union membership within these companies isn't as high as I'd like it to be, for all of the reasons I've said already. I think you'd get a better sense of it across our European partners, where these there are more members in these companies. They'd have a better sense of the impact of that Trumpism on the DEI stuff. But certainly, we've seen it. I guess for me, the impact really is, there's just a kind of an aggression in how these companies operate now. It's always been the case that American companies that have operated in Ireland, some of them will bring in that sort of legal minimum requirement attitude. So in my experience dealing with the certainly the American tech companies, some of them will operate only to the minimum legal threshold. So once they're legally compliant, that's all they concern themselves with. To give you an example of what I mean by that, if you're making workers redundant in Ireland, there's a very low legal minimum payment that you have to make. Most companies in Ireland don't only make the legal minimum.
What is it, like 1 month salary and you are gone after 20 years, something like that?
We pay, if you've got more than 2 years service, you get paid 2 weeks per year of service. Right? So if you've less than 2 years service, if you're made redundant, you're entitled to nothing legally. So we recently went through a redundancy with one of the contracting companies to Meta, and we're assuming on the instruction of Meta, they were told just adhere to the law. So this company let hundreds of people go that didn't have 2 years service, and they got no money, they got no payment. Now, most companies wouldn't do that. Most Irish companies, most European companies wouldn't do that. They'd make some, they'd come to some agreement either with the union involved or with the employee reps, if it was a collective redundancy that had been elected to represent their colleagues, and that would, generate some minimum payment. But we've seen that aggression shift, that more.
Okay, question towards this. Was it the case in the past as well, or they just kind of became more aggressive in this particular approach?
No, I think it has become more aggressive.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm saying that kind of anecdotally. I don't have stats to back that up, but certainly, I mean, I've been dealing with.
But you are swimming in those waters for a couple of years, so you have seen things. So
over 20 years experience dealing with American companies, I do see a shift in their attitudes. It's probably, a function of the fact that they're emboldened now under a Trump administration in America, that their senior management teams in America, in the States, in California, wherever they are setting a tone, a cultural tone, and that's been transmitted into Ireland and probably into Europe.
Everywhere else, no? When I speak with folks from wherever, then I hear similar stories, not different stories. So this is it. This is the sad part of capitalism. So anyway, so I wanted to run it for 1.5 hours roughly. So here we are at the end. And well, what can I tell you? Thank you very much for the insight. The Irish situation is interesting, and I would say and hope to be continued, in a couple of months, years, whatever, when we, again, kind of something interesting happens in Ireland, we can chit chat about the situation. So thank you very much.
Very welcome. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks.